Hi folks, we're going to take a look at page 41, number 27, and here they're asking us to find the exact values for these trig ratios. Now we notice here that these angles are not special angles, so the trick here is to write them as combinations of special angles. Now, when we think of our basic special angles, we have pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3. And of course, those are only the ones in the first quadrant. We've got then pi over 2, then we've got 2 pi over 3, 3 pi over 4. And one thing we notice here is that these can all be rewritten using the same denominator as the ones given in the examples we're looking at. Okay, and that's the trick here, is to not think of pi over 6, but to think of this as being 2 pi over 12, and this is 3 pi over 12. And right away, when I have these two, I realize that I can write pi over 12 as a nice combination of these two special angles. In other words, 3 pi over 12 minus 2 pi over 12. In other words, pi over 4 minus pi over 6. So if we take A, we can rewrite this angle, pi over 12, as, so this will become the cosine of, like we said, pi over 4 minus pi over 6. Now, if you go to the next one, which is 4 pi over 12 for pi over 3, we see that we could have also written it as 4 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12. So we've got different possibilities here. But once we have it as the cosine of this combination, we can now use our compound angle formulas. And in this case here, the one for the cosine of difference. Okay, and that's given by cos of the first times cos of the second. Okay, and here, subtraction for cosine, it's the opposite, so plus sine of the first, sine of the second. Okay, and now these are all trig ratios which we can calculate. Okay, so I'll draw myself some little diagrams here real quick. So here, pi over 4, of course, is 1 root 2, and then pi over 6 is 1 2 root 3. And now from here, it's just a matter of sticking these in. So cos of pi over 4 is just 1 over root 2. Okay, cos of pi over 6 is just root 3 over 2. Okay, and then sine of pi over 4 is again 1 over root 2. And then sine of pi over 6 is just 1/2. All right, and we see here that we already have a common denominator of 2 root 2. So here we've got root 3 plus 1 over 2 root 2. Okay, and I'm happy to have the answer in this form here, or you can rationalize the denominator. In other words, multiply numerator and denominator by root 2. So this becomes root 6 plus 1 times root 2 is just root 2. And then root 2 times root 2 is 2 times 2 is 4. There you go. So either version is fine. All right, so now we can do the same thing with 11 pi over 12. Okay, clearly though, no combination of these will work. So you can either keep writing special angles as fractions over 12, or you can sort of think here 11, well, is 9 pi over 12 plus 2 pi over 12. Okay, and we already know that this is pi over 6. Okay, and 9 pi over 12 is 3 pi over 4, which again is a special angle in the second quadrant. Okay, you could have also used 8 pi over 12, so 2/3 pi, plus 3 pi over 12, which is pi over 4. So you see different combinations will get that too. Okay, so we'll work with this one here, 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 6. So now for B, we're going to rewrite sine of 11 pi over 12 as sine of 3 pi over 4 plus pi over 6. And again, now we're going to use the compound angle formula for sine. So here it's going to be sine of the first times cos of the second. Okay, now notice how I talk about that formula. I don't talk about angles A and B. I try to think about the order. Okay, so for sine, those two formulas, whether addition or subtraction, keep the same operation. So plus, and now it's just going to be sine of the second times cos of the first. Okay, now I already have my diagram for pi over 6. Since I used that before, I can draw my little diagram for 3 pi over 4, and that's going to be negative 1 root 2. Okay, and now let's just go ahead and calculate this. So sine of 3 pi over 4 is just going to be 1 over root 2. Okay, here cos of pi over 6, again we had that before, root 3 over 2. Okay, and this is going to be plus sine of pi over 6 is just 1 over 2. And then here cos of 3 pi over 4 is going to be negative 1 over root 2. All right, so bring this all together, and we have again root 3 minus 1 over a common denominator of 2 root 2. Okay, so again, you can leave your answer like that, or multiply numerator and denominator by root 2 to rationalize. So this will be root 6 minus root 2, and root 2 times root 2 again is 2 times 2, which is 4. Okay, so just to recap, when you see an angle which is not one of your special angles, and you're being asked to determine an exact value, more likely than not, what you're going to be looking to do is to write these angles as some combination of your special angles, and then using the identities to solve them. Okay, that's it for this one.